For 8 years, I raised 2 children who weren't mine, because my wife made sure I never knew the truth. I found out everything the day I pressed play on a hidden tape, and heard her begging another man to get her pregnant. My name's Jack, and I've been married to Rachel for just over 8 years now. We've built a life together, one that includes our 2 incredible kids. Our son Lucas, who's 8, and our daughter Emily, who just turned 4. When we got married, Rachel was already expecting, and Lucas came into the world about 6 months after our wedding. To most of our friends and extended family, the timeline didn't raise many eyebrows. They were happy for us, supportive even. But Rachel's parents? That was a different story. They were heartbroken, maybe even ashamed of how things played out. And to be completely honest, I don't blame them. I take full ownership of how things began. It was me who convinced their daughter to take that leap before we were officially committed. I was the one who brought her into something she wasn't ready for. I was young, impulsive, and so sure of my feelings that I didn't stop to think about the consequences, for her or for the life she had ahead of her. In doing so, I ruined the vision her parents had for her future, and in their eyes I'll probably always be the guy who stole something sacred. And yeah, I live with that. They saw her marrying someone beneath their expectations. Not the man they dreamed their daughter would end up with. And maybe they're right about that. I've heard their words. I've felt their disappointment. And honestly, sometimes it cuts deep because I know there's truth in what they say. I did rob her of something precious, and I carry that weight every day. Still, what we shared in those early days wasn't one-sided. Rachel wasn't pressured or manipulated. She made her choice just as much as I made mine. And even though it all unfolded quicker than it should have, I don't regret it. Not even a little. That time in our lives, as messy and complicated as it was, meant everything to me. And I know it meant something real to her too. But try telling that to her parents. They're stuck on the idea of that early pregnancy like it's the only chapter that matters. They'll never be able to see past it. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I love their daughter or how devoted I am to our family, I'm permanently cast as the villain in their story. Rachel and I first crossed paths when she was still finishing high school back in a suburb near Chicago, and I was a college sophomore down in Champaign at the University of Illinois. From the moment we connected, there was something different about her. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other for years. It wasn't long before we were officially a couple. Just 1 month in, we shared something intimate, something that deepened our bond in a way I can't even fully explain. Our relationship grew quickly after that. Once she graduated, Rachel moved back in with her parents and started working locally while we tried to figure out the next step in our lives. Things weren't always easy. In fact, for the past several months, our relationship had started to fray at the seams. One of the most absurd arguments we kept having was about sleep, or more specifically, about who was keeping the other from sleeping. She insisted I was the one snoring like a freight train, while I swore up and down that it was her relentless wheezing that kept me up night after night. We'd go back and forth, half joking, half serious, caught in this weird loop of nocturnal blame. I'd lie awake for what felt like hours, listening to her little squeaky snores while trying to will myself back to sleep. Now, I'll admit I've caught myself snoring a few times too. I'm not innocent. One night, she nudged me and laughed, "Babe, if we don't get this under control, we're gonna end up exiling each other to different bedrooms." I couldn't help but chuckle and agree. Yeah, we definitely needed to figure this out before one of us started sleeping on the couch permanently. I felt a strange sense of relief knowing, for once, I wasn't shouldering all the blame. Rachel gave me a playful swat on the hand and grinned, murmuring an apology for putting everything on me earlier. I could tell she meant it, and in that moment we both softened a little. I wrapped my arms around her, pulled her in close, and kissed her gently. It was the kind of kiss that lingered, one that felt like home, like things were still okay, at least for now. I held her there for a minute, touched her back lightly. She didn't pull away. That small, warm closeness between us still existed. Later, when dinner was ready, Rachel's friend Judy seemed thrilled, especially with how our kids and hers got along so naturally. The kids, 4 of them all together, ran around the living room laughing and shouting like old friends reuniting at summer camp. It was the first time in a while that the house felt full in a good way. I made an excuse and slipped upstairs. My heart was pounding. I needed answers even if they tore me apart. I sat on the edge of our bed holding the recorder I'd stashed away and hit play. That's when I heard it again, that voice. Rachel's voice. "It's been too long, Steve," she said on the recording, her tone low and intimate. "I've missed you these past few months, but I promise this afternoon I'm going to make up for it. Let's make this a day to remember. I can't wait for you to get me pregnant again." I froze. That word, again, hit me like a freight train. Then another voice came in, A man's urging her to leave me and be with him. And Rachel. She pushed back, but not in the way I needed to hear. Don is important to me, she said. I don't want to hurt him. What we have, you and me, it's only physical. That's all. Then she practically begged him, just stop talking, Steve. Please. Don't ruin this. I want you to make love to me now. Fast. I want to be carrying your third child by the time you leave today. Third child. My hands trembled so badly I had to set the recorder down. The rest of the tape was exactly what you'd expect. Unmistakable sounds of two people, together. Groans. Whispers. Gasp. Her voice. His voice. It became too much. I couldn't listen anymore. The word for how I felt was devastated. It wrapped around my chest like a steel band, pressing tighter with every breath. I'd been blindsided, gutted by something I never saw coming. And as much as it hurt to admit, I wasn't an idiot. I'd been lied to, but I wasn't naive. I had to think, fast. I needed a plan. I needed to protect myself, and more than anything, I had to protect my kids, if they even were mine. That thought alone threatened to destroy me. First things first, I had to make a copy of that recording. I didn't know when or how, but I was certain that one day soon I'd need that tape. The recorder had a dual cassette deck, and I started the process of duplicating it. While it worked, I searched the house for something I hadn't looked at in years: our high school yearbooks. I eventually found them buried in a box in the back of the closet. I carefully slid them into the trunk of my car, trying not to make noise, trying to be invisible in my own house. I put the box back like it had never been touched. Just in case Rachel ever noticed it missing, I could say it was in a different one. I knew that seeing her face that night, pretending things were normal, would give me away. She'd read it in my eyes in the way I couldn't fake a smile anymore. I couldn't risk it. I needed space to figure out what to do next. So I called the one person I trusted more than anyone outside my family, my boss, Jim. We'd worked together for years, and over time, our friendship had turned into something solid. I knew I could count on him. I told him enough to explain why I needed to leave town for a few days, and he didn't ask too many questions. He just said, "Do what you need to do. I've got your back." Before I left, I spoke to Rachel one last time over the phone. I kept my voice steady, told her something had come up with work and I had to go out of town. She sounded confused, maybe even a little suspicious, but she didn't press. "I love you, Jack," she said softly. I didn't say it back. I couldn't. I drove over to Judy's place that afternoon with a heavy heart. I told her I had to leave town on short notice, and thankfully she didn't ask too many questions. I explained that Rachel would be by in about an hour to pick up Lucas and Emily, and she nodded, saying it was no problem. Then I asked if I could bring the kids with me while I got things packed up and said my goodbyes. She agreed to that too without hesitation. In the past few weeks, I'd quietly arranged to have DNA tests done, one for each of the kids. I didn't want to believe what I'd heard on that tape, but deep down I already knew the truth. Rachel had all but confirmed it with her own words. Still, I had to see it in black and white. The results would come soon, and I was bracing myself for the final blow. Back at the house, I gathered just enough clothes to get through a few days. I didn't want to linger. I didn't want to breathe in the same air that now felt poisoned by betrayal. After loading the car, I drove the kids back to Judy's and thanked her, sincerely, for being there when I needed her most. She smiled kindly, sensing there was more going on than I was saying, but again she didn't press. From there, I checked into a quiet, mid-range hotel in Harvey, far enough from Chicago Heights to avoid running into anyone I didn't want to see, especially Rachel or anyone who might tip her off. I needed space. I needed time to think without the pressure of her voice, her eyes, or her questions. Later that evening, I found myself sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know what to do with the rest of the day, so I pulled out my phone and checked my messages. To my surprise, there were 3 voicemails waiting. The first was from Rachel. Her voice was soft but agitated. She said she was hurt that I hadn't contacted her since I supposedly landed in New York. She didn't know where I was staying and was starting to panic. She asked me to call her back. The second message, also from her, was colder, more frustrated. Her words were clipped. She said she wasn't even sure I had gone to New York at all, and now she didn't know how or where to find me. Listening to her, I felt nothing. Just calm. She thought I was hundreds of miles away at LaGuardia, pacing a hotel room in Midtown, when in reality I was a few towns over. That distance, imagined or real, gave me the breathing room I desperately needed. I didn't call her back. Not yet. With a few quiet hours ahead of me before Rachel got off work and possibly started hunting me down, I settled in at the small desk in my hotel room and opened my laptop. I had a project that was overdue for work, and the routine of focusing on something else gave me a small anchor. I started by listing out everything I already knew and what still needed answers. It was methodical, almost therapeutic. Still, I knew this peace wouldn't last. Eventually, I'd have to face Rachel and everything that came with that confrontation. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't the same man anymore. Bit by bit, my trust, my softness, it had all been eaten away. Lately, I'd caught myself sounding more bitter, more cynical, even in my own thoughts. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't going to apologize for it either. She made this bed. All I had done was climb out of it. I stared at my phone for a long minute, then finally tapped her name and hit call. She picked up immediately, and I could hear the fire in her voice before she even said a word. "Jack, where have you been? Why didn't you call last night, or this morning? What is going on?" I didn't flinch. I let her get it all out. Every ounce of confusion, every sharp-edged question, I just let her pour it out. And I didn't give her the comfort of answers. After settling in at the hotel, I decided to grab something to eat. I spotted a place called George's Rib House on the way back from picking up some supplies and figured a little comfort food couldn't hurt. The ribs weren't bad, greasy in that familiar, satisfying way, and they gave me just enough warmth to carry me back to the cold reality waiting in my room. Back at the hotel, I sat down and started working through the pile of information I'd collected like a man on a mission. First, I opened Rachel's old graduation album. I went page by page, reading every note her classmates had scribbled inside, some heartfelt, some generic. I started coding the messages, breaking them down into categories: friends, acquaintances, and the people who sounded just a bit too personal. I made a list, grouped the names. If a girl's message sounded warm or sisterly, I marked it down under girlfriends, people who likely ran in her social circle. But the guys? I paid special attention to the guys, especially the ones who wrote anything remotely flirtatious or nostalgic. I was looking for patterns, for names that came up more than once. Then I pulled out the alumni reunion booklet. That little pamphlet, handed out at the door during her recent high school reunion, was a goldmine. It had everything: names, addresses, careers, marital status, number of kids, even hobbies. Not everyone had filled in every detail, but it was more than enough. What struck me most was how easy it was to find out personal things about people when they don't realize someone's watching. And I noticed something else too. Folks tend to gossip more freely about people they don't like. It's like they want to unburden themselves. With that in mind, I started digging into one name in particular: Steve Wilson. He kept popping up. Rachel's old flame. They'd dated all through high school, according to someone I'd spoken with earlier. 3 years steady. But she ended it right after graduation. It didn't sit right with me, not anymore. I looked up Steve and found out he still lived in Chicago Heights. Worked as a loan officer at Chase Manhattan. Recently divorced. 2 sons. I even confirmed he had attended the reunion. His name was listed in the booklet. So he was definitely in the room that night. And knowing what I'd heard on that tape, I was almost certain he was the man. Wanting to dig deeper, I reached out to someone I'd remembered from Rachel's past. A woman named Jill Monroe. She'd never been close to Rachel, which worked in my favor. I figured if anyone had dirt, it'd be someone who didn't feel the need to protect her reputation. I gave Jill the same professional background spiel I'd used before, something vague about conducting a personal integrity assessment. Then I asked her directly, "Do you know anything about Rachel Monroe, now married to Jack Turner, that could affect her husband's future employment with the National Security Service?" The words had barely left my mouth before she lit up like a firecracker. "You mean Rachel Monroe?" she snapped. "Oh, come on. That woman's been trouble since she was 17. Everybody knew it." She didn't hold back. Called Rachel manipulative, conniving, untrustworthy. Said she had a long history of getting involved with people behind their partners' backs, and then somehow playing the victim every time. "She could lie with a straight face and get you to apologize for catching her," Jill said, shaking her head. Every word landed like another nail in the coffin of the marriage I once believed in. I wasn't sure how much of what Jill said was rooted in jealousy, resentment, or just plain bitterness, but one thing was clear: Rachel had a past and parts of it were catching up fast. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with all this information, but I was sure of one thing: Rachel had underestimated me. She thought I'd crumble, that I'd forgive, that I'd disappear quietly. But I wasn't disappearing. Not anymore. I never imagined it would come together so easily, and maybe that's what hurt the most. It stung to realize that all this time, there were people who knew about what had been going on. People who said nothing. Meanwhile, I was the one walking around in the dark, clinging to a version of my life that was never real. Wanting to be absolutely sure, I reached out to a couple more people from Rachel's past. One woman in particular shared a story that stopped me cold. She turned out to be the sister of Steve Wilson's ex-wife. And according to her, the rumors about Steve and Rachel weren't just whispers, they were practically public knowledge. She told me that Steve's marriage had ended because of those very rumors. His wife had caught wind of the affair, specifically the one involving Rachel, and packed her bags not long after. There were even stories floating around that Steve was bragging about having 2 more children than his ex-husband ever knew about. That hit like a punch in the gut. All the pieces were falling into place now. And it became painfully obvious. Rachel never had any intention of being faithful. Maybe not to me, maybe not to anyone. As hard as it was to admit, this betrayal wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was planned. Premeditated. She was setting me up from the very beginning, long before our paths ever crossed. Do you know what that does to a man? To realize he was just a placeholder in someone else's game? I had nearly all the names and details I needed now, but one question still lingered. Who was Steve really? I had seen a few photos, but I wanted to see the man with my own eyes. So I drove to the Chase Manhattan branch where he worked, sat in the parking lot and watched him through the window. I didn't introduce myself. Didn't want to. I just needed to see him, Rachel's Steve. He was just as sharp-looking in person. Confident. That easy charm you recognize instantly, the kind that draws people in. Now I understood how she fell for him. I just couldn't understand why she chose to drag me along for the ride. Later that day the DNA test results arrived. I had paid extra for overnight processing, more than I probably should have, but I couldn't stomach the idea of facing Rachel without knowing the truth. I brought the envelope to Jim's office. Jim, my boss and closest friend, had stood by me through everything so far. I wanted him there when I opened it, not just for support, but because I might need a professional favor from him down the line. With shaky hands I slid open the envelope. Dear Mr. Turner, the letter began. We have completed testing on the 5 samples you submitted on November 15. I didn't have to read the rest aloud. The look on my face told Jim everything. He pulled me into a hug, firm and sincere, and muttered, I'm so sorry, man. I can't even imagine what you're going through. But whatever happens, I've got your back. Always. Then he tried to lighten the mood, cracking a half smile. I've got to be careful. You're good enough to put me out of a job with investigations like this. I chuckled, even if just for a second. It was the first laugh I'd had in days. Even though my world was falling apart, having that support meant something. It reminded me I wasn't alone. Armed now with the recordings, the graduation notes, the testimonies from her old classmates, and the DNA report, I was ready. The truth was heavy in my hands, but I needed her to hear it, to see it, to face it. So I asked Rachel to come over. When she walked in, she immediately sensed something was off. Her smile faltered. Her hands fidgeted. I offered her a beer or a glass of water. She chose the water. I handed her the glass and pulled a chair up in front of her. She sat down slowly, her back straight, trying to mask the tension building in her face. I took a deep breath and met her eyes. And then, I began. I know, I told her plainly. I know about the affair. Her eyes widened just a flicker, but I saw it. I went on before she could speak. I have proof. And I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you that moving forward, you need to understand something. I'm not in the dark anymore. I expect your behavior from here on out to reflect that truth. Her mouth opened, but I lifted a hand to stop her. I wasn't done. The woman I married, the woman I believed in and built my world around, that woman's gone. I need to understand who took her place. I'm asking you to tell me everything. Every detail. I need you to be honest, Rachel. She sat frozen, her glass of water untouched. I want names. I want to know when it started, how often it happened, where you were, why it happened, and what it led to. Don't leave anything out. I'm not doing this to punish you. I need to know who you really are, because the version I've carried in my heart is gone, and I deserve to know what replaced her. Silence. Then, with a tone like steel, I added, effective immediately, I'm moving out. I paused, my voice steady though my chest was pounding. As for the kids, do you want to pick them up next month or should I? I'm fine either way. If you decide to handle pickup, I'll visit them every Wednesday night. I'll pick them up from daycare, have dinner, and bring them back by 8:30. I'll call ahead so you know when to meet me. Weekends we'll stick to the same schedule. You pick the times that work best for you and I'll follow it. Her lip trembled. My words were measured, but I could see the storm rising behind her eyes. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The emotion pushed up my throat and I asked, barely able to speak, do you even want to keep the kids with you or should I take them? She staggered back like the words had hit her physically. Her hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. "I want them to stay with me," she whispered, pleading. I nodded. My heart was wrecked, but I didn't want to make this worse for them. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll call tomorrow so we can figure out the schedule." I stepped toward the door, looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Rachel." Then I left. The month passed quickly after that. Every Wednesday evening I picked up Lucas and Emily. We had dinner together, something simple, something warm. We'd laugh, talk about school, draw goofy pictures. I returned them home each night, keeping my word. Then one evening I found a letter waiting for me. It was from Rachel. It started with the usual lines, how she missed me, how the kids asked about me constantly. But near the end her words shifted. "If you're reading this and feel like there's a part of you that still believes in us," she wrote, "please come home. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not just for the kids, but because I still love you." She signed it, "With love, Rachel." Attached was another letter. This one was longer, more reflective. She tried to explain the past, like she was peeling back her layers one by one. "When I met Steve," she wrote, "he pressured me, tested me, and part of me was tempted to give in. But I didn't. I held out because I always believed my heart belonged to the man I'd marry someday. Then I met you." She said I had every quality she ever wanted. That she hadn't expected to fall so hard. But despite all her words, despite her confessions and declarations, I knew better. Even before I opened that letter, I had already felt the truth. Lucas and Emily weren't biologically mine. And yet, I loved them more than life itself. "I saw in you everything I ever dreamed of in a husband," Rachel wrote. "You were charming, thoughtful, brilliant. You made me laugh when I needed it most. I pictured us together, growing old, raising a family. I believed you would be the kind of man who'd never let me down." Her words blurred as I read them, but I kept going. "And yet, I gave in. I gave myself to Steve." She didn't try to sugarcoat it. "I wanted it," she wrote. "I wanted to feel that closeness with him. As much as I loved you, I loved him too, Jack. In a different way maybe, but it was still love. And when I gave myself to him, it wasn't by accident. I chose it." She confessed that when she got pregnant, she already knew the child wasn't mine. She said she never planned to be with Steve long-term, she wanted me to be her husband. Not him. So she lied. Told me I was going to be a father. And I believed her. "I'm so sorry," she wrote. "You married me with nothing but love in your heart. You never questioned me, not once. From that moment on, I was unfaithful." Rachel described meeting Steve at hotels, motels, his house, sometimes even in public parks or restaurants. She admitted they'd sneak around in their cars when they had to. It wasn't just physical, it was playful, emotional, intimate. "He made me feel things I hadn't felt before," she said. "Things I didn't even know I was missing." She claimed the memories had blurred over time, she couldn't give me the exact dates anymore. Sometimes once a month. Sometimes every other month. We always found a way. And then she wrote the part that shook me more than anything. "But Jack," she said, "you're still their father. You raised them. You've loved them from the beginning. Steve has never even seen them. He doesn't want to be part of their lives. And neither do I want him to be. You're their father. You always will be." She ended with another plea. "If I could take it back, I would. I can't erase the hurt, but I'm praying that you come home. I hope there's still love left in your heart, to give us a second chance. I hope we can rebuild this marriage." I set the letter down slowly. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface started rising again. My voice shook as I turned to her and said everything I'd been holding in for far too long. "You slept with Steve. You carried on an affair before we were even married. You knew what you were doing. And you let me believe our children were mine." Her expression twisted into something unreadable: guilt, regret, panic. "You stood before me," I said, "and told me you loved me, right after you'd been with him. You came home from your nights with Steve and looked me in the eyes like nothing happened." Rachel tried to speak, but I kept going. "I know the truth, not just because of what you wrote, but because I heard it. I found the recordings, the tape, the conversations. You said you wanted to be pregnant by him again. You were planning to bring a third child into this world with him, and raise it with me." She went pale. "You want to know where I got all this from? It wasn't just the tape. It was your classmates, people who saw through your games years ago. One of the guys who was in love with you in high school? He said he walked away when he found out about what you were planning, how you already had a plan to cheat on your future husband with Steve. People knew, Rachel. You weren't hiding it nearly as well as you thought. And Steve." I continued, my voice low. "Of course he couldn't keep quiet. You think a man like that's going to stay silent? No. He told people. He bragged. And you, I looked straight into her eyes. You let him. She started crying, but I felt nothing. Not anymore. All I could think about was the years I had lost. The life I had given to someone who never once truly gave it back. She once wore the image of an innocent queen, pure, graceful, untouchable. That illusion shattered completely with the last piece of evidence I found. A folder tucked away in a drawer. Inside was a letter from another man. I didn't need to know more. Her letter had already confirmed every painful suspicion I'd carried, and the reality was laid bare. Still, I took a moment. For the first time in a long time, I looked Rachel in the eye and said calmly, "Thank you for finally telling the truth." And I meant it. Because despite the agony of what she admitted, at least she stopped pretending. At least she had the courage to drop the mask, even if only after I'd uncovered everything on my own. "Rachel," I told her, "I gave everything I had to our marriage. My heart, my trust, my future. I truly believed you were doing the same. For a while I was happy. I thought we had built something worth holding on to." I paused. "But now I see it clearly. Our marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a burden. And not because I didn't try, but because you made it something it was never meant to be." I stood up and looked around the room that used to be our shared life. "This situation you created? I can't stay in it anymore." I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. "These are the divorce papers. Once you sign them, let me know. I'll be keeping the master bedroom from now on. You can move into the spare room." She said nothing. "You and the kids will need to find a new place within the next 2 months. If you refuse, Rachel, I'll have no choice but to share the evidence I've gathered, with your parents, your friends, your co-workers. Everyone who thinks they know you." Her face went pale. "I know you need your job and I won't interfere with that unless I'm forced to. But the truth, it always finds its way to the surface. And one day the kids, our kids, will find out. Maybe not tomorrow, but someday. And they'll know what really happened." I picked up my coat. "Goodbye, Rachel," I said. "We'll see each other again. In court." She chased after me, desperate to say something, anything, but I had already closed the door behind me. It was over. The next morning, when I returned to pick up a few things, I noticed her clothes were gone from the closet. Half the dresser was empty. She had started packing. The silence in the house was deafening, and for a moment, I wondered if the entire nightmare had just been some warped dream. But no, it was real. I sat down on the floor of the living room and watched the woman I once loved drive away, to him. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. I received my share of the house sale, less than I'd hoped for but more than I needed. And the best part? I was free. Free from deception. Free from carrying the weight of someone else's lies. The courts initially ordered me to pay child support, until the paternity results came in. Once the truth was verified, that obligation disappeared. Rachel made more than I did anyway. She was on her own. A few weeks after the divorce, I was walking in the woods near my new place when I stumbled upon a little puppy darting through the bushes. He ran from me at first, but when I followed, I found 3 more, small, shaking, abandoned. I brought them home. They became my family. 2 years have passed since then. Rachel's life? Well, I heard through the grapevine that Steve ended up in the hospital. Apparently, he was assaulted by the husband of yet another woman he'd been seeing behind closed doors. I didn't feel pity. Just closure. As for me, I come home every evening to wagging tails and quiet joy. I make my own dinner, put on some music, and for the first time in years I feel peace. Rachel got the life she wanted. And I got my soul back.